Morai Rabotai, we are continuing on Masechet Avodah Zarah. We are on Daf Yud Gimel Amud Bet, at the bottom of the Amud by the Mishnah. Today's Amud is being learned. L'schud Yoshua ben Diana, Yal Bad Rivka, Menashe ben Asi. This Amud is also being learned. The Rufuah Shelema of Yaakov Meir ben Ahid. Today's Amud is also being learned. Leilui Nishmat, Tzipora Bad Yitzchak. Says the Mishnah, Elu Devarim Asurim limkor le'ovded kochavim. There are certain things that are prohibited to be sold to an oved kochavim, even if it's not related to the chaga of their holidays, so to speak. It's not a day of Yom Tov of Chag for them, or 3 days prior. During the course of the entire year is asur to sell them certain things, because the understanding culturally was that if a goy is buying this item from you, the odds are that he's going to be using it for Avodah Zarah, because those are the things that are specifically meant for the service of Avodah Zarah. Hence, you don't sell it to them. So says the Mishnah, Estarbolin ubenot shuach uvtorot ulvona v'tarnegolet lavan. So the Mishnah enumerates 5 different things. The Estarbolin benot shuach, we're going to discuss what it is, and petotarot, we're going to discuss that it's not an item, so it's really 4 things that the Mishnah counts. And Rabbi Yehuda says mutar limkor lo tarnegol lavan ben hatarnegolin. You know, when it's asur to sell a tarnegol lavan, a white, beautiful chicken, will be asur because usually they would use that for Avodah Zarah. And Rabbi Yehuda says that's only if you're selling a single tarnegol lavan. But if you're selling it amongst other tarnegolim, then it will be mutar, which again we're going to specify what that exactly means in the Gemara. Ubizman shu bifnei atzmo. And if you have a good customer, you want to sell a tarnegol lavana, that's the last thing that you have left in your merchandise, you want to sell it, and a goy comes to buy. The Mishnah says there is a way out. The way out is you snip one of the fingers and you cut it off, and that would be something that for Bnei Noach will be considered a mum, would consider a blemish. Now they will never bring it as a tikrovet for Avodah Zarah. Already we have discussed how to get around the sugya of sal ba'al chayim, that you're inflicting pain on this animal. But nevertheless, it will be now mutar. Ubizman shu bifnei atzmo kotea et etzba'o umochro lo. Lefi she'en makrivim chaser la'avodat kochavim. Anything that's considered chaser, anything that's missing a limb, the goyim also had derech eretz. They wouldn't bring it for their Avodah Zarah. So therefore that would become mutar. V'she'ar kol advarim, all the other things, aside from these 4 items, staman mutar, upirushan asur. Which normally speaking we would understand, it means if the goy comes and asks you to buy some rice, then it will be mutar to sell him some rice. Chitim, some wheat, we mutar to sell him some wheat. But if he says, I am buying this wheat for Avodah Zarah, then it will be asur. Of course, you don't want to support the cause of Avodah Zarah. Says the Mishnah, Rabbi Meir Omer, Af dekel tov. Not only those 4 items that we mentioned, the beginning of the Mishnah is asur, but dekel tov also is asur. A good palm, a quality, high quality date palm is also going to be asur, and also chatzav. Those 2 items are added by Rabbi Meir to the list of the Mishnah. So let's begin discussing what the Mishnah means. My istrabulin, the top line of Yudaled Amud Aleph. What is this istrabulin? Says the Gemara, it's turnita. Turnita, Rashi says, this is a type of cedar tree. The Gemara in Masechet Rosh Hashanah, Daf Chav Gimal, counts 10 different types of cedar, and this is one of those types. So says the Gemara, Urminu, you can't say strubulin is turnita, because we know, I'm going to explain this a little bit outside, We know that Turnita does not have proper shorashim, roots, that stay intact during the cold season of winter. They go bad, and then every year they have new shorashim, and that actually makes a difference in the halachot of Shvi'it. Because things that are asur for Shvi'it are things that have proper roots. So therefore, if I show you that this Turnita actually in the halachot, in regards to Hilchot Shvi'it, is one of those, then it can't really be Istarbulin, would be Turnita, says the Gemara. Let's read it. Urminhi, Hosifu alehen alachsin v'istarbulin and muchsasin ubnot shuach. Those 4 items were added to the list of the things for Shvi'it. And says the Gemara, if you want to say that Istarbulin in our Mishnah, that you cannot sell to the Goyim, is the same thing as Turnita mi'ita b'Shvi'it. You have Turnita in Shvi'it as a Isur in business with Shvi'it. In other words, there is an Isur in the year of Shemitah of doing business with the fruits of Shemitah. It says in the Pasuk Le'ochla that everything is hefker. You could go there in the fields and you could gather stuff and eat it. But Le'ochla means to eat, but aval lo lischora. But you can't do business with it. In other words, you can't go and gather and go sell. That you cannot do. So says the Gemara, the things that are included in that are items that have shorashim. It says the Gemara, if you want to say Istarbulin or Turnita mika b'Shvi'it, Turnita is not asur in Shvi'it. V'hatnan, we learned, ze'aklal, kol sheyesh lo ikar, yesh lo Shvi'it. Anything that has proper roots that stay intact throughout the winter, that is considered something that on Shvi'it would be asur. But anything that doesn't have proper roots, then it's not going to be asur. V'chol she'en lo ikar, en lo Shvi'it. Anything that doesn't have ikar, en lo Shvi'it. You could do sechora with them. You could go and do business with those things that don't have proper roots, right? So says the Gemara, Ela Amar Rav Safra, Peri de Arza. You know what we're talking about? It's not Turnita, but it's Peri de Arza. It's a different type of cedar, and it's not even the tree itself, but it's the fruits, Peri de Arza, which is really referring to acorns. They used to be, because they're symmetric and they're beautiful and so on and so forth, they used to use that as decoration and service for Avodah Zarah, right? Now, as we will see in just a moment, they will actually hang these things in front of the Avodah Zarah. V'chen ki'ata Ravin, when Ravin came from Eretz Yisrael, Amar Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Elazar was Mara de Ara de Israel. That was his title. He was the master of Eretz Yisrael. He, especially after Rabbi Yochanan, he was considered the Gadol Ador. For those who remember, we once mentioned, the Gemara says this in Masechet Baba Metzia Daf Pedalet. The Gemara says when Rabbi Yochanan got upset with Rav Shlakish, whoever Rabbi Yochanan got upset with was bad news. They would die. It just simply was mustajabul daweh. He was so close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. If somebody heard his feelings, even b'shogeg, it would be bad news. We had this multiple times. When the Gemara discusses this also in Masechet Baba Kama, Kuvidayin, the Gemara has a story of Rav Kahana, who had to run away from Eretz Yisrael, from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael, and Rav, his Rebbe, right? Rav told Rav Kahana, says, "You go into Rabbi Yochanan, you got to be careful. So I make a gezerah on you for 7 years. You don't talk in learning with him. just sit there, learn, listen to what he says, and keep quiet. He knew Rav Kahana was a genius. He was a sharp mind. He knew that he's going to cause trouble. And if you cause trouble with Rabbi Yochanan, that would be really trouble. And the story is that we don't want to get into it right now. He actually did not keep that thing. He started speaking. He upschlagged the whole shiur of Rabbi Yochanan. Everything he said, he dismantled it. And Rabbi Yochanan got very hurt by him. The way the story goes, it came out in a very wrong way, and Rav Kahana passed away. The same is with Resh Lakish. The Gemara there says in the Pedalit, the Resh Lakish, even though that he married Rabbi Yochanan's sister, he was a brother-in-law, and he was his chavruta, right? But they got into a halachic back and forth, and Resh Lakish got very hurt by him by saying something that he referenced to Resh Lakish's past history as a head of bandits, and he actually talked back to him in a very strong way, and he said, "I don't need you," even, and so on, and Rabbi Yochanan got depressed from it. It got very sad from what he said, and Resh Lakish just got sick. In there, the Gemara says after Resh Lakish passed away, Rabbi Yochanan was depressed because he didn't have a chavrutana. So Chachamim saw that he's so down. They got Rabbi Elazar. This Rabbi Elazar for him was a chavruta, and even though that everything Rabbi Yochanan would say, Rabbi Elazar would bring him proof from here, proof from there. He was a tremendous person, but Rabbi Yochanan did not like that. Rabbi Yochanan said, "Look, Efo at ve'efo bar Lekisha. Where are you and where is Resh Lakish?" Resh Lakish was completely different. Whatever I say to you, you say you're right. I don't know. I know I'm right. That's why I'm saying it. I don't know support. I need someone to challenge me. Resh Lakish, whatever I would say, he would ask me 24 questions on it. He would not let me go, and I had to answer those questions. And from the back and forth of questioning and answering, the thing would become clear, would become geschmack. Rabbi Elazar was the best that Eretz Israel could offer after Rabbi Yochanan. So this is Rabbi Elazar. So it says Ravin is one of the few people who moved from Eretz Israel to Bavel. Usually, normally speaking, the Gemara says in Masechet Ketuvot Daf Kuf Yud Aleph that it's asur to move out of Eretz Israel unless you have some legitimate reasons, right? So here, one of the few people who had legitimate reasons, and they were students of Rabbi Yochanan before, students of Rabbi Elazar before, and came to Eretz Israel. One of the later ones is Ravin. So when Ravin came from Eretz Israel, he said in the name of Rabbi Elazar, Peridarza. We're talking about acorns, basically. The sterbolin is those things that they used to use in hanging in front of the Avodah Zarah. So if a goy comes to the marketplace, even not in the time of the holiday, and he's looking for acorns, what do you think he wants it for? Right? It's not for a kindergarten project of their kid. Usually would be for the Avodah Zarah. Says the Gemara, Benot Shuach, Amar Rabba Bar Bar Chana Amar Rabbi Yochanan. What is Benot Shuach? Te'eni chivarta. White figs. White figs was what was considered a delicacy and a beautiful design for in front of the Avodah Zarah. They would also hang that in front of Avodah Zarah together with acorns. So says the Gemara, what is petotarot? What's petotarot? Says the Gemara, petotarot is not an item. It means istrobolin and benot shuach with their petotarot. What is a petoteret? Is the okis, is the wood that attaches to the bottom of the acorn or to the tip of a fig, that you cut it off from the tree with that. This way you have something to hang it with. But if that's cut off already, the Oved Avodah Zarah is not going to buy it, because how are you going to hang it in front of the Avodah Zarah? So hence, it's only asur to sell those items to an Oved Avodah Zarah if they have their petoteret. Says the Gemara, Amar Rabba Bar Chana, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, be petotarotehen shanu. It's only asur to sell the white fig or the acorns, the etz erez, the perot of erez, only if they have their petoteret. So says the Gemara. So that is two first items of the Mishnah. Now the next two are levona. right? And Levona says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, Levona Zaka. There are different types of Levona, and the only Levona that's Asur is Levona Zaka. That's the finest type of Levona, and the Goyim only would use Levona Zaka for Avodah Zarah. They wouldn't do low quality. You want to do something, they would do the best for Avodah Zarah. So hence, the type of Levona that's Asur to sell to a Goy during the course of the whole year, even if they don't say that they want it for Avodah Zarah, it will be only Levona Zaka. Says the Gemara.
What is Levona Zaka? It's like, it says it's translated as pure. What does that mean exactly?
So usually Zaka means it's purified, right? That means it's sifted and so on and so forth. You have many times Shemen Zayit Zach, right? What does the Shemen Zayit Zach means? It's Shemen Zayit, but it's only the first drop that is completely pure from any mixture of the particles of the olive itself. So therefore, it's clearer. It's not nicer. It's the same thing. But here many of the Mefarshim. Here many of the Mefashim understand that this is one type of Levona, which it was called Levona Zakah, not necessarily that you clarified and you purified the same Levona. So, says the Gemara, Tana umikolan mochrin lahen chavilot. If you want to sell in bulk, that would be mutar. In other words, if someone comes to buy one little piece of Levona Zakah, that's Asur. But if they have a whole pallet that you're selling to them, if you're selling a chavila, that would be mutar. V'kama chavila, Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera, en chavila pachot mishelosha manin. If they are already buying shlosha manin, right? Shlosha mane, we already said how large it is, right? And if someone is having already shlosha manin, that's a large quantity. If someone is buying 3 manes, you for sure know that they're not using it themselves. That is a wholesaler amount, and the one that's buying from you is the middleman. He's going to be selling it to other people. What's the obvious question?
He's going to sell it.
Obvious question is, so what? So now you're selling to someone who's selling to Avodah Zarah. So why is that mutar? In other words, if you tell me the goyim who buy Levona Zakah, they're buying it for Avodah Zarah. So if some goy comes and buys a whole lot of Levona Zakah and he's going to be selling it to the goyim, what do you think he's selling it for? Also Avodah Zarah. So why is it mutar to support the Avodah Zarah a step before? Says the Gemara, why aren't we concerned that he's going to go sell it to other people? And here the Gemara discusses something extremely important in the halachic world, which we alluded to this in previous dapim when we spoke about lifnei iver lo titen michshol, the isur of putting stumbling block in front of a goy versus in front of a yid, right? That in other words, if a goy is mitzuveh al avodah zarah, if bnei Noach, one of their mitzvot is not to do avodah zarah, right? You cannot put a stumbling block in front of a goy. How about what the Gemara is going to call lifnei de lifnei, an early on stumbling block that's not for him, but it is going to be a stumbling block down the road. It's lifnei de lifnei. I'm selling to someone, he's not going to be stumbling on this. He's not going to do avodah zarah because he's doing it for business. But my action is an early thing of eventually leading to a stumbling block for somebody. That the Gemara calls lifnei de lifnei, right? So when the Torah says lifnei iver lo titen michshol, don't put stumbling block in front of a blind, does that mean you are dealing with the blind person directly? Don't put a stumbling block in front of them. But you don't have to think through, if I put this here, then that will happen, then that would happen, and somebody is going to stumble. Are you mechuyav to think like that? Or, as long as it's not like between me and the blind person, and again, we said before, blind means iver be'oto davar. right? It's Asher Hogenet. When it's not talking about the actual stumbling block in front of actual blind, but it's talking about giving it Asher Hogenet, causing someone to stumble spiritually, causing someone to stumble with your words, with your bad advice that you give them. That's the So maybe as long as me dealing with the so-called Iver, nothing is going to happen, then I'm absolved. Right? And that's exactly what the Gemara says. It's Machloket Rishonim over here, whether or not this is extended to the Yid, to the Jew as well, or is only by a Goy. In other words, the Gemara is going to say that early stage Lifnei Iver is not your obligation. If you and the blind guy are good, that's all the Torah expects from you. But Lifnei de Lifnei, Lo Mfakdinan. You're not concerned about Lifnei de Lifnei. That's too complicated. You don't have to bother yourself thinking, I sell this to this, even though that he's not going to serve Avodah Zarah, but maybe he's got to. That's not your concern. And the Rishonim debate whether or not that is extended to Jews as well, or maybe by Jews you have to also be concerned about Lifnei de Lifnei. But be that as it may, the Gemara answers, Amar Abaye, Alifnei mefakedinan, Alifnei de Lifnei lo mefakedinan. We are commanded to be concerned about lifnei iver lo titen michshol, not to put in stumbling block directly when you're dealing with the iver, but alifnei de lifnei, on an early stage when I'm not dealing with the iver, the one that I'm dealing with is not going to be the iver, is not going to be stumbling, then lo mefakdinan. That's already off your limits of the mitzvah.
What if you're the manufacturer of an item that you know is made like specifically people only use it for Avodah Zarah? You know, like let's say they make like a necklace or out of beads, right? And you're just manufacturing because you know there's a need in the market, but 99.9% of people are using it just for Avodah Zarah.
That's a very good question. And again, the example that he gave actually happens to be a subject of many of the Tshuvot of Acharonim, whether or not, let's say, the jewelers, which you have many Jews in the jewelry business, and they sell all kinds of different items, and within them there are, let's say, crosses, right? Right? Catholicists, for instance, they are considered of the Avodah Zarah because of the way they relate to Yashka, and the Trinity, the believers of Trinity are considered by Jews are considered of the Avodah Zarah. Now, there's a whole Tosfot we spoke about before. If for themselves it's considered Avodah Zarah, Shituf, and so on and so forth. That aside from that, but for you it's going to be considered Avodah Zarah. So, can you sell a cross basically as a necklace? So, Chacham, for instance, in Yabya Omer has a tshuva on this, and he holds that not necessarily is going to be asur because the cross that people use as pendants are not necessarily an Avodah Zarah, but it's a zecher ledavar. They don't worship it. They don't. It's just a symbol of Christianity, of their faith and their emunah, but it's not considered the Avodah Zarah itself, right? And that's important to know because, again, without getting too much deep into the subject, the Eliyahu Rabbah, for instance, writes, what makes a sanctuary of a church to be considered a Bet Avodah Zarah is if they have the large cross there that people actually respect and bow to and so on and so forth. That is what makes it Bet Avodah Zarah, right? If you don't have a cross there, even though that they come into that hall, that sanctuary, so to speak, and they pray and they gather, that's not considered bit avodah zarah. It doesn't have the halachot of bit avodah zarah. It actually makes a difference in the machloket achronim of Avraham Chayadam, whether or not you could turn a church into a bet midrash, into a synagogue, which many of the buildings around town that they are yeshivas or shuls used to be. Prior to that used to be churches, and for instance, if you have, let's say, a Church of Scientology, then they don't have a cross there. It's not something that they do. That would become much easier. So that really depends on whether or not it's actual Avodah Zarah. But if it would be actual Avodah Zarah, yes, of course, it would be a problem, not just to sell it, but even to own it would be a problem.
There was a rabbi in North Africa that was given as a gift large gold cross, and somebody gave him heter to wear.
Yes, again, there are a lot of stories about that. For Chacham Obadiah, even that he was given from thing of England. He was given something that may have resembled something in past history of Avodah Zarah and so on. There's a lot of stories about how different Gedolim dealt with these things. So says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Yonah Amar Rabbi Zera, Amar Rab Zvid. Ve'ika dematni, Amar Rabbi Yonah Amar Rabbi Zera, Tarnegol lemi mutar. If a goy comes to the marketplace and says, who has chicken? I want to buy chicken. Anyone has chicken? That would be mutar to sell them even tarnegol lavan. In other words, if you have just the white chicken and a goy is asking for a chicken, any chicken, you could sell him the white one. Right? We just said in the Mishnah you cannot sell white chickens to them. But says the Gemara, if they're not asking for a white one, they're just asking for a chicken, you could give them whatever you have, including if you have only a white one, you could sell them a white one. So says the Gemara, mutar limkor lo tarnegol lavan. Tarnegol lavan lemi, but if he says, I am looking to buy a tarnegol lavan, oh boy, that's for sure not mutar, right? Because you know that he wants for Avodah Zarah, of course, asur limkor lo tarnegol lavan. Tanan, now the Gemara contrasts this with our Mishnah, right? Let's see if this fits our Mishnah. We learned in the Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda omer mocher lo tarnegol lavan ben tarnegolin. Rabbi Yehuda, who is more lenient, by the way, from Chachamim, he holds you could sell tarnegol lavan only when it's as a package deal with other tarnegolin, other colors. So says the Gemara, Hechidami. What is the case of Rabbi Yehuda? Case of Rabbi Yehuda is if the goy comes and asks for what? Hechidami. If the case is that the goy came and said, Tarnegol lavan, who has Tarnegol lavan? And then Rabbi Yehuda says you could sell him Tarnegol lavan with other Tarnegolin. Afilu ben Tarnegolin namilo. That for sure he can't sell. Right? Because whenever the goy says Tarnegol lavan lemi, he's only looking for lavan. You know why he wants the lavan, so you can't even sell him within a pack of other tarnegolim. But says the Gemara, afilu ben tarnegolim namilo, ela lav de ka'amar tarnegol lemi. So must be that the goy comes into the marketplace and says, I want to buy chicken. Tarnegol, stam. And even then, even when he's not asking for lavan, Rabbi Yehuda says, you know when you could sell it to him? Only as a pack. You cannot sell an individual white chicken to him. And that's the more lenient one. And Chachamim disagree with that, and they say it's even worse. ואפילו אכיל רבי יהודה בן תרנגולין אין בפני עצמו, לא. או תנא אפילו בן תרנגולין נמי לו. תנא קמא, the חכמים, they don't let you even sell תרנגול לבן with a pack of תרנגולין. So therefore, our Mishnah seems to clearly indicate that if a goy comes to the marketplace, asks for stam, tarnegol, says, I need a chicken, you cannot sell him one individual tarnegol lavan. It's our Mishnah. And yet, the Braita you just brought says, if a goy asks for tarnegol stam, he comes and says, I need a chicken, you could sell him a white tarnegol. So, it's a discrepancy between our Mishnah and the Braita. How do you deal with that discrepancy? Clear? Says the Gemara, Amar Rab Nachman bar Yitzchak. No, you misunderstood the point. In our Mishnah, when Rabbi Yehuda says it's mutar to sell a pack of tarnegolim to them, is when the goy comes in and says, I need a red, a black, a colorful, and a white chicken. Right? So he's asking for everything. So you know he's not shopping for Avodah Zarah. He wants a whole bunch of things. And in that case, that's the case that Rabbi Yehuda says, okay, you can sell him the whole thing, the whole package. We can't sell him one single white. You can sell him the whole thing. And Chachayim say, no. If he asks for white, even if he asks for 50 other colors, you cannot sell him. Because he specifically mentioned white, you cannot sell him. That's the machlokah in our Mishnah. But our Mishnah never spoke about the case that the goy comes to the marketplace and says, I want a chicken. And you know what the halakha is if he does that? You could sell him a white one, alone. So really our Mishnah and the Braita is aligned in the contrast, yes?
With clipping his toenail? Or
No. without. You could just sell him. That Mishnah, the later part of the Mishnah is like, if you're stuck, is there any way out? It says, yeah. If you make it pasul for tekrovet, then it's mutar. Always mutar. So says the Gemara, Tanya Nami Achi. We also learned this actually in a Braita clearly. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, that our own Rabbi Yehuda of our Mishnah says, Ematai, when is it asur? Bizman sha'amar tarnegol ze lavan. When he says, this tarnegol lavan, I want this one. That's asur. Right? But if he says, Aval im amar ze veze, if he says, I want the white one, the colorful one, the red one, the black one, the brown one, you can sell him all those things and it's mutar. Ve'afilu amar tarnegol ze, and even if you says tarnegol ze, this specific tarnegol, עובד כוכבים שעשה משתה לבנו או שהיה לו חולה בתוך ביתו מותר. If you know, and the Ritba says, if you know means you're not relying on him. The Welt knows. People know this guy just made a chatuna for his, or they have a sick person in the house. It was believed to be therapeutical to have white chickens. I'm not sure how exactly that worked, but if you know that he is buying it for a different reason, and not for tikrovat avodah zarah, then it's mutar to sell him a white one when he asked for a white one. So that's another exception. Two ways so far that you can sell a white one. One is you clip their finger. The other one is if you know for sure that this guy is using it for chole or for mishteh beno. So says the Gemara, what? אסור אלא אותו היום ואותו האיש בלבד. But אותו היום ואותו האיש מי האסור? He says, what do you mean? We just got finished saying in the previous daf that if a goy makes a mishteh for his son, that's the day that he does Avodah Zarah personally. So it's true that's not a holiday communally, but it's for him a holiday that he does Avodah Zarah, and on that day you cannot sell him anything. Anything you cannot. So what do you mean you could sell him Tarnegol Lavan? You can't even sell him Tarnegol Shachor. Forget about Lavan. For sure Lavan should be Asur. This is the day of his holiday. Says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Yitzchak bar Misharshia, Yitzchak bar Misharshia answered, and this is again, the Gemara is answering over here a question that is obvious because we have two reasons for this to be asur, right? You have a person that is making a holiday, a personal Yom Tov, so to speak, for his loved one, for his son, right? And he says, take a look at Rashi over here. It says, "Eno asur laset velatet imo, ela oto hayom mishum de makriv hu hayom leavodat kochavim," because it's his day of avodat kochavim, his day of thanking his avodah zarah. So he sell them anything azil hashta umode, right? And therefore the Gemara has to answer it, and the Gemara says, you know what we're talking about over here is Tavzik, which means Rashi says, "Hai mishteh de katani mutar limkor lo tarnegol lavan, lav b'mishteh chupat beno." It's not talking about the wedding of the son. That would be asur to sell him anything. But here it's talking about because that would be for sure for tekrovet avodah zarah. But over here is a mishteh of party, just partying together for his son. Sheosim hane'arim ze im ze vekorin. They're making a party for his son, but not a wedding of the son. So they do party. Do they do Avodah Zarah? No, it's not so chashuv. It's not so chashuv to go bring Avodah Zarah and bring takrovet Avodah Zarah. When they actually have a climax of simcha for wedding, they do it. So therefore, if you know that this goy is throwing a party, it's your neighbor, it's a neighborhood, you know tonight they have a party, but you know it's a type of party that there's no Avodah Zarah. It's just kids getting together and having a good time, and therefore they want to have a fancy chicken there. It's a white one that the skin is nicer, whatever it is. That's mutar because you know for sure they're not doing Avodah Zarah with it. So again, the Gemara is saying some of this is very subjective. Some of this is you have to understand if it's known that this guy is not going to do Avodah Zarah, then it will be mutar. Otherwise, it will be asur. And the next concept of the Gemara is going to be discussing things that are regular. If a goy comes and wants to buy regular food during the course of the year, when it's going to be mutar and when it's going to be asur, which we're going to continue the days to come.